Hey everyone, Dave here. This video is about network interface card configuration. And so I'm going to show a couple things here, kind of move around a little bit. We're going to show a connection of a laptop's wireless card to a Soho router wireless access point that we set up previously. And then we'll show some of the settings, and then we'll take a look at a wired network interface card from our main system and show some of those settings as well. So what we have here is I'm working at the Windows 10 Pro laptop, and down here we have the icon for wireless. If we click on that, we'll see that we have a connection right now to something called Unknown Network 5, and that's a different wireless network that I have running here. I also have that wired connection, that Ethernet connection with this patch cable going directly to this, and I've got that multi-IP, that multiple IPs set up on that we did previously, but I want to connect this guy to this in a wireless fashion. And so we have two options for that. We've got the 2.4 gigahertz network we set up and the 5 gigahertz. And that's what I want because this has an 802.11ac M.2 card in there. So let's click on that. And we'll click on connect. And we need to enter the security key. Okay, and we'll do that. And click next. It verifies and connects. And we should get an IP address on that in just a little bit. There we go, connected and secured. Let's take a look at that. We got a couple places where we can look here. First of all, we can look here. We'll refresh our network connection screen, which is in the control panel. And it shows here we have that Ethernet wired connection, and here's that Wi-Fi connection now connected to EM5 BACN. Yes. And if we go to our command prompt, clear it out, and we'll run an IP config, we'll take a look at what we have. Here's that wired connection with the two IPs, and here's the Wi-Fi adapter. And it gave us the Soho router, the wireless access point, gave the laptop 10.252.25.150. So it chose to do that. Now remember, the network we're on is 10.252. The last two octets could be whatever this guy chooses. And so we can prove that we're on the same network as that Soho router by doing a ping and pinging that IP address, which is right here, 10.252.0.101. And press enter, and we get the replies. So we're in. And we can look more at the adapter. If we go back to our network connections, we can right-click on that. And, we could go to the properties and find out more about IP and anything that we have installed for that. But we could also right-click on that. We could go to the status and see what we have here. We have internet access through the Soho router, and our speed right now is at 433 megabits per second. That's an 802.11ac connection, and we can see here we have full bars. But it's the data transfer rate, or speed, or throughput that we're most interested in, and that's going to settle at 433 megabits per second. We can also disable this if we need to here. We can connect and disconnect from wireless networks, bridge connections. If we go back to properties, let's say we want to configure this a bit more, we can go to the configure button, and that'll bring up the properties window for that device. You can also get to this from the device manager. And so you can see here the device that's running. It's an AC3160 M.2 card that we saw physically when we opened the laptop. And if we go to advanced, we'll see lots of options here that we can work with. For example, the channel width that we have set up here for 5.2. We want to have this set to auto. That's what the wireless access point is set to, but you can change the width from, say, 20 megahertz to 40 megahertz. We're going to leave that as auto. But a couple of things that you want to look at here. For example, transmit power. We can adjust the power of the wireless antennas. And we said, we have the M.2 card, and it goes out and around through here and up here, those antennas. We can adjust the power of those between a value of 1 for lowest and 5 for highest. Could be that we don't need 5 the highest, especially because the laptop's right next to the router. Well, it won't be later, but let's see what happens if we change it to 1, click OK. Okay. It took a moment to reconnect because we're changing the radio power. It's going to identify and try to reconnect to it, but I'll bet you it'll still be full bars. So let's take a look at the status. And it is the same because of the proximity here. In some cases, you may want to limit the wireless connectivity, the radio power, because you may have a concern about war drivers or people trying to access a laptop. But I'm going to put that back to 5, the highest. You never know. You might leave it as 3, medium, because these are pretty powerful radios that are in laptops. So you may want to reduce that, and that could be company policy. You also have things like wake up on magic packets, and that's part of wake on LAN. So if some computer needs to access data on this laptop, it could be woken up over the LAN via the BIOS or UEFI. You have different wireless modes that you can set up here. Roaming aggressiveness. How aggressive is this wireless connection going to be when it's looking for a wireless access point, which you may need to set to higher. The throughput booster, which can work to increase the data throughput rate or the data transfer rate of a wireless network adapter if it's compliant. There's a lot of options here. Okay, but basically what you would do, once again, to get to that is you'd right-click on the card, go to Properties, then go to Configure, and then you'd go to Advanced, and you could make those changes from there. And I'm going to reset the transmit power to highest and reset that. Now you can also go to the control panel directly, and let's say you want to go to the control panel, you can go to the run prompt and type control. You can also do it by going through the start menu and so on. And then from the control panel, we'd want to go to our network and sharing center, and then go to change adapter settings. And you can get to it from there, or you can go a little bit more direct and go to the device manager, which you can also get to directly from the run prompt by typing dev mgmt.msc, that's dev management, and then find the network adapter, in this case the AC3160, right click that and go to properties, and your advanced settings will be there. So different ways to get to the same thing basically. And of course, be looking in your command prompt to see all the data about that connection. And we only did an IP config. You could do an IP config /all to find out more information. And here's that Wi-Fi. You can see the IP address that was handed to us, the subnet mask, and that this is leased to us. This is a lease because it's given to us by a DHCP server. .101, that's the router. That's the Soho router, the wireless access point, which is also the default gateway. It is also the DNS server. You only see this additional information and things like the MAC address if you do an IP config /all, and it tells us DHCP is indeed enabled. Yes, and this is the DHCP server that gave us the address. For our Ethernet adapter, DHCP is not enabled. It says no. We statically configured those addresses here. All right. And so to connect to wireless networks, you go to your icon here, which if you only have wireless, it'll look like this. If you only have a wired connection, it'll look like a little computer or port connection. And you'd right click on that And you could go to network and internet settings, or you could just click on it to bring up those networks that it can see. This is also where you could set up a hotspot and set it to airplane mode to turn off all wireless activity. If we right click and go to open a network and internet settings, you'll see your actual connectivity from the computer to the wireless network out to the internet. It shows you what you have here. This is Windows 10. And, you know, in the control panel, you can also go to Network and Sharing Center to see that same type of information. So two different places to go. This is the new look for making these configuration changes. But if you ever have to get more in depth with the configurations, then you'll end up in the control panel. For example, somewhere like change adapter settings. Okay, so you want to be able to get around a little bit and be able to view how you can connect to wireless networks, how to view those wireless networks, how to use ipconfig and ipconfig/all, how to get to the advanced settings for the configuration of the wireless adapter, all that stuff. And so now let's move over to my main system. We'll take a look at a wired connection and some of the advanced settings for that. Okay, so I've headed over to my main system here, and this is the AV editor computer. It actually has two wired network adapters, no wireless, just two wired. And so to look at those, we could do an ipconfig. We'll press enter, and we'll see a variety of information here, some of which I've shown before when we were doing some other work earlier in another video. So here is the main network that I connect to. That's my main network where I do all my work. You can see the IP network number is 192.168.41. And this particular computer is 202. The default gateway is 192.168.41.1. That's another router that I'm connecting to there. Separate router altogether. Then I also connect from this computer with another Ethernet adapter to my dpro42.com domain, which is that BACN network I was talking about previously, and using that 10.252 IP network number. And this particular computer gets 10.252.0.254. And the default gateway for that is 10.252.0.101. And that is that router, that wireless access point that we were just showing. This way I can connect to my test network as well with a second network card. And I have another IP here, 192.168.0.254 on this guy, which is what I use normally. That actually could create a IP conflict because that is the address I used on the laptop on the wired side. It won't, because there's no central connecting device running 192.168.0, but still they're both configured with that as a secondary IP, and I forgot I had done that here. So that's one thing I want to change, but definitely be able to do your IP config and also know how to do an ipconfig/all so that you can see more in-depth information. Like I say, you can see if DHCP is enabled or not, the MAC address, the DNS server. It is not enabled on either of these. I'm running statically for both of these connections. So you want to be able to do that. You also want to be able to go to the Network and Sharing Center. I'll bring that up here. And you can see my connections here. I have Network and Network 2. Right? One is called Main Network, one is called dpro42. Click on those to find out more information, or you can go to Change Adapter Settings to see those. And so, for example, we could go to, say, my main network and take a look at that. Go to Properties. We'll see all the different items that are used by this connection. Most importantly, IP version 4. And if we look at those properties, we'll see the IP address that I added here. We can go to Configure, and we can take a look at the Advanced section. And there's one main thing that we want to look at here, and that's speed and duplex when it comes to a wired connection. We're not interested in duplex when it comes to wireless, but with wired connections, we are. Right now, it's set to auto negotiate, but we can change the speed. The max we can run is 1 gigabit, but we could change that to 100 megabits or 10 megabits. And you want to know the difference between full duplex and half duplex. Full duplex, which is what you want, means that you can send and receive data at the same time. Half duplex means that you can either send or receive data, only one at a time. So generally you want it set to full duplex, but if your router that you're connecting to has it set that way and you set it, the client, to auto negotiation, then it should set to full duplex. But there are a ton of different options here, some of which can make things more efficient for your network connections, like flow control. Normally you want receiving and transmitting enabled, but there's others that can actually make the connection faster if you're working with certain types of data. Right? So lots of information here in the advanced section when it comes to network interface cards. So you want to be able to get here for this. Let's take a look at the dPro 42 card. We'll go to properties. And I said I really shouldn't have that IP on there, that secondary IP. So I just went to IP4 properties, and we'll go to advanced and take a look here. Here is that 192.168.0.254, which I don't want. So I'm going to remove that. Click OK. OK. We'll say yes for multiple gateways because we have 2 network cards on here. And close. And make sure it doesn't disable and re-enable or anything like that. And we should be good. Okay. We can also right-click and go to the status of this to see the connection and what speed we're actually at. So we're at 1 gigabit per second, which is good. And you can see how many bytes of information we've received here. Over 1 million. And check that for the main network also. Check the status, make sure it is at 1 gigabit per second. I'd love to have a 10 gigabit per second network, but I don't have it right now. And you can see much more data being sent and received on this main network connection. That's where I'm doing all my internet work and doing everything else and connecting to a couple servers I have here where I store data in a NAS box. So you can see here gigabytes of data sent and received. Once again, as I mentioned, you could go to the run prompt and go to the device manager by typing dev-mgmt.msc, bring up the device manager to see those network adapters. And you can see the category here. I'm going to minimize that. See the category here, network adapters, open it up, and we see indeed the Ethernet connection. That is built into the motherboard. And then this gigabit CT, a separate network adapter that I installed there. And then anything for virtual network adapters. But these are our 2 physical network adapters. And we can find out more about them by right-clicking, going to properties, and again, advanced, if we want to find out, say, speed and duplex, packet priority, receive buffers, flow control, jumbo packets. You can do larger size packets. And so this gets more into some in-depth networking. Really, I don't see it being necessary for the A+, but just another place you want to go to be able to configure your network adapter. So definitely the device manager, the network connections, network and sharing center, and also, of course, the command prompt. All right, so a little bit about network interface configuration. And another quick tip for you here, consider using simple names for your network adapters. If they're wired, Microsoft in Windows 10 will call it Ethernet and Ethernet 2, but use simple names for this. This way they're easier to work with if you ever have to work with them in, say, the command line, which you may have to do sometimes. All right, so there's a little bit about network interface card, or NIC configuration, on the wireless and the wired side, and that's about it for this video.